Probiotics have so many different beneficial properties. One of them is growth promoting, right? So that's why the poultry industry has been at the forefront of using probiotics. In fact, for my own study, so since I'm adding a probiotic or trying to feed probiotics to chicken, I have to see when I try to find the feed, it is literally difficult to find a feed without probiotic additives in them.
Welcome to the Feed Science Podcast. I'm Adam Farnolds, coming to you from North Carolina State University's Prestige Department of Poultry Science in the Animal Food Manufacturing program here. On behalf of Wisenetics, I'd like to introduce our guest for today. Our guest is Anne Amalaradjou. She is an associate professor at UConn, the University of Connecticut. For those of you that aren't familiar with what UConn means, it's that time of year. Everyone should be familiar with UConn right around now, as we get into basketball and the March Madness tournament. Anne works on things related to poultry production and especially things around the food safety space. Thanks, Anne, for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
You bet. If you wouldn't mind, that was a really brief introduction, but if you wouldn't mind, let everybody know kind of your background, how you came to be at UConn and what got you there, and then some of what you're currently working on now.
So my background, actually, I started as a vet. That's my background. I went to vet school, but decided I want to go more into research than clinical practice. So I did my vet school in India, and then I came to UConn to do my graduate education. So I did my doctorate here in the department where I am right now. So I did my PhD in food microbiology. After which I did a postdoc at Purdue in the food science department. And then I came back to UConn as a faculty.
Sure.
That is kind of my educational journey, let's say. In terms of research that I am doing right now, like you introduced, a lot of my work has to do with food safety and food microbiology. But when I started my own independent research, I kind of took a detour and started working into poultry production, right? Because I figured they can tie in. You can improve production while you're also improving food safety. So that is a 20,000 foot view of what I do. So I work with broilers and layers, and the goal in both cases is to improve production while improving food safety, so improve the sustainability of the enterprise. So that is what I do.
Commercial mills and integrators often face challenges in managing moisture levels, leading to pellet quality challenges, reduced efficiency and productivity, feed wastage, and nutrient segregation. Proper moisture penetration and retention within feed particles during conditioning and pressing acts as a heat conduit, allowing for uniform heat transfer throughout the meal. This uniform distribution of heat improves starch gelatinization and increases pellet quality and durability. Milling efficiency aids such as MaxiMill facilitate moisture absorption and retention within pellet feeds and help producers mitigate many of these commonly observed pellet appearance deviations. Contact a clean feed expert today to learn more about how MaxiMill supports pellet quality.
So when you are looking at things related to, let's say, the food safety side and improving the production of the animals, are you specifically looking at mostly nutritional strategies overall, the inclusion of certain types of additives, different things that are being done with the manufacturing of the food, some combination of all of those things?
So I am primarily looking at additives.
Okay.
Primarily probiotics. What I work with. Probiotics have so many different beneficial properties. One of them is growth promoting, right? So that's why the poultry industry has been at the forefront of using probiotics. In fact, for my own study, so since I'm adding a probiotic or trying to feed probiotics to chicken, I have to see when I try to find the feed, it is literally difficult to find a feed without probiotic additives in them, right? That's how far ahead the poultry industry is in terms of using probiotics. So what I try to do is I actually try to start from the embryos, right? So my goal is to improve production throughout the lifespan of the bird, right? So if you think of a broiler, 6 weeks grow out period, but then there's 3 weeks of incubation. And if you look at any species, right? For example, let's talk about humans, right? When the mother is pregnant, there's a lot of focus on prenatal nutrition because it's important to sustain the development, which is important for later on. So that is kind of what I have taken and applied to chickens, right? So there's a lot of untapped potential during the embryonic growth phase. So what we do is we provide probiotics to the embryos, the eggs while we incubate them, and then we continue feeding them during the grow out period. So that's what we have done. And some of our data shows that supporting both phases of growth really improves their potential. So yes, I do use probiotics as additives. The other thing that we also trying to do as part of a new project, which we will probably start in a couple of few months, we're trying to see if we can create emulsions for probiotics so that they're more stable.
Sure.
Right. So that's a big concern when you add them, whether they survive, they're stable. So we're trying to also work a little bit with other feed technology folks so that we can improve their stability and survivability and get their enhanced effect.
Absolutely. Okay. Well, I've got a few questions, so I've got a couple segues here. What I'm going to start with is we probably have some of our listeners that are in the poultry space, certainly might be very familiar with at the very least the injection of eggs early on for things like vaccination. Others may not even be aware that that's something we do. But would you mind describing, for those that might not have any familiar with in ovo feeding, like what exactly that process looks like? Because I think there's quite a few people, and even some that would be listening to this, that wouldn't even know that that's something that you can do.
Yeah, so in ovo feeding is not a new technique, right? It's been around for some time, and most of it is through injections, like you just mentioned, right? They go in at different times. We do a lot of vaccinations like that, right? But one of my goals has always been to come up with something that is user friendly.
Okay.
Right. So all we do is we spray probiotics. That's what we do. So there is no injection. You don't need any special training. You don't need any special equipment. Right. So we just spray them onto the eggs. We incubate the eggs. And then we look at how well they hatch. What is the hatching quality? Right. So that's an important criteria. And then how they grow on later in the grow out form. So it's very simple. You just spray the eggs with probiotics.
Gotcha. So you're taking advantage of the fact that shell is permeable, and it's permeable for the purpose of respiration, and the pores are big enough for something like a probiotic to transport across the shell membrane.
Yeah, so that's been a question that we have had asked. How do you know the probiotics are getting in? And my answer is Salmonella can get in, probiotics can get in.
There you go.
So yes, just because of the porosity of the shell, you're correct. So, other bacteria can go in, so probiotics can go in. We do have some unpublished data. We're looking at how these organisms get in, where they are. So we have actually traced these organisms when we sample the developing embryo. We have actually traced them in the developing gut. We've also traced them in the hatchling gut. So we know they get in.
So then going back to then after they hatch, or I guess moving forward to after they hatch in this case, you described actually one of the things that's difficult for you in particularly where you're at is to get feed that doesn't already have probiotics in it, so you can have a negative control to work from. What are some of the challenges of putting probiotics into feed, though? Assuming that you do have it, what are maybe some of the challenges that you see with them versus other additives that have been, on the market for longer enzymes and even longer medications and things like that? What are the probiotic challenges when it comes to making feed?
One of the biggest challenges is stability, right? So when you make the feed, depending upon how the feed is made, there are a lot of treatments, extrusion, and so on and so forth that happen with feed. And that's also really dry.
Yeah.
So survival of the probiotic is really, really important. If I say I need 1 million cells, right? If I say, let's say that's a probiotic adding to a feed, and in the feed, if it says, okay, the feed has 1 million cells of whatever the probiotic is per kg of the feed, then you have to make sure that that is a million there. So the biggest concern with probiotics as opposed to other additives is the survivability in the feed.
Okay.
Because feed is not a favorable environment for them to survive. So that is the biggest concern. The stability and survivability of the probiotics is the biggest concern.
Right. So the feed matrix itself, like you said, because it's dry, isn't a great environment. And then if we're thermally processing the feed, now we've created a manufacturing problem for it too.
Yeah. So that is the biggest concern. So that's what we're trying to do with the new project, trying to figure out better ways to improve how we can deliver them so that they're survivable and they're shelf stable, right? So, and also so that producers
Right.
don't have to do anything with it. They just open the bag and feed. Well, that's what they're doing right now, but we're trying to see if we can enhance their survivability and viability. So at the end of the day, the chicks get what they need to get.
Any significant differences between the feeding when you're looking at, you mentioned you work with both the broilers and the layers, any significant differences there? Obviously we know that they often get fed different types of feed forms.
Yeah.
They also have different feeding strategies, and then of course now we also have different environmental management. We have broilers that are only in house, broilers that are in the ability to go outside, not go outside. And then obviously in layers, we have cages and modified and full paddock. So how does some of that go into the decision making on differences between, I guess, those two different production classes, and then within those two different production classes, the kinds of environments that they experience?
So yes, for example, when you think of the pellets that we feed layers, right? So there's an additional step that's done to process the feed. So that could have an effect on probiotic survival. So in our studies, we have just flow reared the broilers and our layers, but we don't have access to paddock. So it's not an open system,
Sure.
right? A closed system. So we haven't tested them out. But having said that, that is a common method of poultry production, right? At least we have a lot of farms here in the New England region, in the Northeast, that use different production systems. They all backyard, small farms. So we do see that. And I don't expect to see a difference, at least with how the probiotic behaves. I do not expect to see how that will impact the probiotic survival, because once you feed it to the birds, the probiotics get into the birds and then you're happy.
Are the probiotics that you're interested in using that are going into feed, are they relatively novel, doing novel things that and they're not things that are going to be otherwise found in the environment? Or is there the potential that no, for something that is in a housed environment, we're trying to get something into the gut, but if this was a bird that was otherwise exposed, to outside, where we've got challenges, pathogens, and obviously predators and other kinds of things, but because they are picking bugs off the ground and other things, they are maybe getting some of these. Are there things there, or the probiotics we're talking about not things they would probably pick up in the environment even if they were exposed to it?
They could pick up, if they're open paddock, they're out there, right? They could pick up other organisms, but not these.
Okay. Right.
So these, not these particular strains. So with probiotics, not two strains are the same. For example, what we found in our, at least with preliminary data, so we use different probiotic strains, and what we found to be effective in broilers is not the same one that's effective in layers.
Okay, sure.
Because again, I would say broilers and layers are two different species. Just,
Right, right.
Yes. So they may pick up other bacteria, obviously, from the environment, but whether those organisms would give them the growth effects or the beneficial effects we get from the probiotic strains, that we do not know.
Okay, excellent. Once again, my guest today is Anne Amalaradjou. She is a associate professor at the University of Connecticut up at UConn, working on poultry health. And we're talking a lot today about probiotics and other ways of changing things related to food safety, which we're going to get to here in a second. One more thing on that, just out of curiosity. So one of the things that we do a fair amount here at NC State in our animal food manufacturing program and in our feed mill education unit is we get involved in product testing for companies.
Mhm.
And I've been doing something like that since I was in an undergrad when I was at Kansas State University. And it has shifted a lot from a lot of the products we saw coming in were enzymes, and that was R&D. And now we're seeing a lot more of these types of additives, probiotics, and other things that are acting in the gut, but that are classified different. When you guys are working with products, and I know you just mentioned something about it, like emulsion, are you seeing, mostly dry products that people are looking at adding? Do you see some that are liquid based, a combination of the two? What are the things that are being like brought that are the newest products? What is their form that they're being used as to be added into the feed?
With feed, right? It depends upon what your target is. If it's feed, then for the most part, we have seen powders. But there are
Hmm.
also folks who want to add things in the drinking water.
Okay.
Then it's more of a liquid because it's easily miscible and you can mix it well. The concern with feed is, if you add something that's a liquid, then if you're increasing the available moisture in that feed, right, then our concerns for storage and mold growth and so on and so forth. So if it's feed, it's mostly dry products. And if it's in water, then it's liquid product.
Okay, that's been my experience as well. That's why I was asking. I didn't know if there were potentially any of the ones that were being, on the newer side that might be coming that way. But we see the same. Most of what comes in is an already dry product. So we've talked about using probiotics, and we've talked about getting them into feed and how they might be experienced differently by the different animals that are eating them in the poultry world anyway. Let's talk a little bit about what is the actual purpose of them. You talked about they're there to improve performance, but in what way? Like, what are the probiotics doing for us when they're in the bird?
So with the broilers, what we have seen is actually they specifically improve muscle growth. I mean, that's what we want with broilers,
Hmm.
right? So what we have seen is starting from embryonic day 10, I want to say, when the embryos are going. So we have seen improvement in uh, breast muscle fiber growth, their development, um, which starts from day 10. And then we've also seen it fall at hatch in the market age birds.
Okay.
So they do specifically improve. So we have seen increase in breast muscle mass. We have also seen that with the leg muscle, but I'm just talking the breast muscle because that's kind of the price cut
Right.
in broilers. Yeah. So to answer how they're doing it, so our initial data shows that these probiotics have ability to modulate the genes that are required for muscle growth and development. So that's our initial preliminary data. That's what it shows, that they help improve the genes, which eventually make the proteins that are required for breast muscle growth. And they also improve feed efficiency, right? If the bird is going to eat more and make more muscle, really doesn't make sense at the end of the day.
Sure.
So we have seen that it improves gut development. It improves the gut microbiome acquisition. It improves digestibility within the gut. So that's how it's so the probiotics are helping to improve how the birds can extract nutrients from the feed we give. And then it is helping improve muscle growth. That's what we've seen in broilers. Layers, we have seen that with egg production, right? So we see that the eggs, they're all AA USDA grade, but they are a little heavier than the ones that do not get the probiotics. We are still teasing out the details of where that weight is coming from, whether it's from the shell, right, or whether it's from the albumin or the yolk. We are still figuring out from the data. And then also it improves feed efficiency. So we are now trying to figure out the molecular aspects of how and why these probiotics are doing it.
Okay. So we're in a space where we've identified certain strains, things that we know work, and we're doing a little bit going in both directions. We're both looking at what can we do with them, how can we get them in the food, or in some cases in ovo. but we're also still learning more about exactly how they work. We know
Yeah.
that they work. We don't exactly know exactly what they're doing in every case still.
Exactly. So, for example, we know that with broilers, we know that they're improving muscle growth, that we can see based on data. But how exactly and why are they improving muscle growth and not something else,
Mhm.
right? So that's what we're trying to tease out at this time.
On the food safety side of things, where do they come in? And I'd be interested in talking to you both about where do the probiotics potentially come in on the food safety for the animal itself. Where does it potentially come in on the improving the nutrition or reducing any potential patho I was going to say pathology is the wrong word, any kind of pathogen effects that they might otherwise experience, anti-nutritional factors that could be detrimental to the bird, causing illness, injury, or disease, which we have always cared about, but now regulatory wise with food safety plans and things being required, care about more. So interested in both how they play into the role of food safety for the animal itself, and how do they play a role into the food safety for us as humans, either consuming the meat or the eggs from the bird?
So what we have done for food safety to study that, we use Salmonella as our example, go-to pathogen, because, I'm in poultry and salmon. Yeah. So
absolutely.
what we have tried to do is we have taken our approach for production when we have tried to use the same to control Salmonella, right? The two birds with one stone.
Right.
Right. So for Salmonella, so again, we have looked at broilers primarily. So our goal is to see if we can do a multi-hurdle approach, right? So from our goal is to start with the eggs again, right? So when we talk about salmonella and how it gets into the production system, right? It starts from the egg. If the egg is contaminated, there's always a chance that the chick that hatches from it could be contaminated. And if you get one contaminated chick, then it's going to, every other chick in that environment, a bird is going to pick up salmonella.
Sure.
So our goal has been to reduce the introduction of salmonella positive chicks.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So we are focused at the hatchery. So just like we treat our eggs with a probiotic, we use the same probiotics, we use the same spray technique. And the only difference is in this case, these eggs are inoculated with salmonella. So because we want to control salmonella.
Right.
Right. And what we have seen again is it not only reduces, it reduces salmonella translocation from the shell into inside of the egg, which is, if it doesn't get inside the egg, then
we're good. Yep.
Right. And then we've also seen how it reduces translocation into the developing embryo. And finally, we have a lesser pathogen load in the hatchling. Right. So the goal is, again, if you have less cedar birds, then lesser risk and lesser likelihood for salmonella at the farm. And so we are also doing grow out studies where we're trying to figure out, okay, does this what happens at the farm level when you're growing out the birds? So we have done the same things. We have introduced probiotics to the developing eggs, and then we introduced probiotics to the grow out birds in the feed, and we have tracked them from day 1 of incubation up until day 10 after hatch.
Okay, so that's salmonella and potentially reducing its incidence in the birds, which is certainly good for the health of the birds and them not getting salmonellosis and being ill. How about on anything as it relates to in the human food side? Obviously, we can have pathogens or other concerns with food safety, similar to what we would see in dairy with milk. We see the same thing in layers, right? Where there's a lot of things that have a nice metabolic pathway to going right to the egg. So we got to be really careful about that. Are there some potential benefits to using probiotics and keeping the eggs safe when it comes to human production?
I'm so glad you asked that question because I have an answer for you. So yes, right. So a lot of my work has to do with hatching eggs, but I also do a lot of work with table eggs, right? So with table eggs, our goal is to come up with an effective decontamination process. So, get rid of salmonella in the eggs. If you get rid of salmonella, reduce risk for food poisoning. So we have used probiotics again. So there we wash the eggs with probiotics.
Okay.
Well, you can either wash or you can spray, depending upon.
Sure.
Right. And we can see that. So what we have done is, so when you wash or spray the eggs with probiotics, right? So it not only reduces a salmonella on the surface, but also reduces salmonella that's inside the egg.
Okay.
So if you use most disinfectants that we use, if you wash the eggs, they remove the salmonella on the surface, but not on the inside.
Mm-hmm.
Although the what's on the surface is important, to control what's on the inside is even more important because that's what makes you sick, right? So what we have seen is we've got really good results in our initial trials where we see that because these probiotics again go in, they can, just like salmonella, they're also able to, for want of a better word, fight off salmonella where it is in its own niche.
Okay.
Right? So we have seen significant reductions in populations. And since we eat eggs, we also have done quality analysis to make sure, I'm putting these probiotics in there. What if it's going to reduce shelf life or reduce quality? And we don't see, so we have stored the eggs for up to 21 days, refrigerated storage for table eggs, and we haven't seen a significant effect on quality or shelf life. So
this may be a silly question, but and therefore I'll make it my last one as this part of our discussion. But is there some sort of, I'm sitting here thinking about, someone's sitting down to breakfast and they're having their eggs and whatever, and they also, they go grab a yogurt there because they want the probiotics in the yogurt. Yes. Are we headed towards the possibility then of, based on some of your stuff, to where actually this egg you're consuming, although I guess you got to cook it, which probably is going to be real good for the probiotics as I think this through. I was thinking, actually, this egg, similar to eggs that are marketed high in omega-3s, high in whatever, is there a possibility of we're marketing this egg and it's actually got some beneficial bacteria to it? Sounds gross, but you're going to buy that yogurt and eat it right next to it in the grocery store shelf anyway.
Wait, so are you asking if the probiotics are in the egg, would you get any benefits from it?
Yeah.
Yes. So, okay. Yes, although I am a proclaimed food safety person with some experience in poultry production, I also do a little gut health. When I say gut health, it's human gut health, right? So for that particularly, we use a lot of in vitro models. We do a lot of mice studies to figure out if it works.
Sure.
So some of the strains that we use on chickens, we've also tested, they have anti-inflammatory properties.
Okay.
So they can help with gut health. Evolutionarily, chickens are so far away from us, but we have certain commonalities. We share some. So yes, they do have some probiotic properties for humans as well.
Okay.
And again, but then if you cook that egg,
probably not going to survive a lot, but maybe some of them. And obviously if you're spraying it on a table egg, it's a food safe product and all this other kind of stuff. So if some of them do make it in there, might be some added benefit, which is interesting.
Yeah. So they will also help with human health.
Gotcha. Very good. Well, I very much enjoyed our conversation. We're coming up on our 30 minutes here, so we'll go into our kind of final few questions here. The first question that we always like to ask our guests is, in your particular area, is there a particular resource if somebody's listening to this and they say, I'd like to learn more about this, that you have found really helpful? And we've had people talk about journals, and obviously knowing that not all of our audience is going and reading scientific journals on a regular basis, but journals, popular press, particular websites. We've had people throw out social media accounts that provide really good information. Anything, one or two in particular, that you have found to be a really good source of information that you would share?
I would say the first thing that comes to mind is Poultry Science, right? It's a really good place to get good information, particularly dealing with poultry. And yes, it's not accessible to all. The other place is extension, right? Every college has an extension, and then I know UConn Extension particularly has a lot of information that is tailored or catered to the producers as such. That's a really good place to get information. The other thing is I am part of the Connecticut Poultry Association, where we have regular meetings with our local producers. That's a really good place for me to learn, because I can be stuck in my lab doing something brilliant, but at the end of the day, if it's not applicable.
Absolutely.
Yes. Yep. It's just doing research for research's sake, which really at the end of the day doesn't translate to anything. So I think talking to the producers is the best way for me to learn.
Yeah.
And of course the Poultry Science meeting.
Yeah.
I would say that's a good place to network and greet and meet and get to learn more.
Absolutely. It's particularly important for obviously our faculty and our graduate students and undergraduate students that can go.
And I should also mention IPPE.
Yep, and just another one of those meetings with a lot of real benefit.
Yeah.
Also, the departmental extension leader here in Press's Poultry Science at NC State. I'm really glad you said what you said about extension. I couldn't endorse that anymore. It's anybody that's in any state with a land grant institution. There's extension there, and they're there to help with
They are,
more things than you can even imagine.
yes,
We obviously are in the poultry world, and so there's poultry things going out. But in our personal life, my wife and I and our kids, we've gotten really into like pollinator gardens, and there's a whole NC State Master Gardener thing that just puts out article after article after article about what to do in your pollinator garden. So there's huge amounts of information out there. So I think that's a great suggestion.
yes. And I should say one of the resources that has been really, again, as you have mentioned, we're not a poultry state, which, I would like to call ourselves that. But
almost every state is a poultry state in some way. That's for sure.
yes, all of us eat wings, right?
That's right.
Yeah. So, but I would say that for some of my work that I do, where I have to work with hatching eggs, I think Aviogen has been a really good supporter of my research program.
Yep.
They helped me procure the hatching eggs. Highline has helped me get layer chicks for my projects. I think without their support, I do not think I'd be able to do my research. So I do have to mention that.
Yeah, no, I'm glad you did. Absolutely. I think that's true for a lot of folks, and probably across the food animal landscape, no matter the species. But yeah, absolutely, in the poultry world, we've got a lot of really, really good industry supporters, right, that help our research by providing those gifts in kind, whether it be materials or birds or whatever.
Yes.
Because obviously they benefit from the research that's going on as well, and they want to make sure that it continues. So no, that's a really good call out. Switching gears a little bit from not so much your area of expertise, but just kind of in general, as you moved through your different career path and everything else. Any other resources that you have found have been really helpful, an organization you've belonged to, or a book you've read, or a particular particular website that you've focused on, having to do with leadership, professional development, continuing education, any of those kinds of topics?
I do belong to a couple of organizations that has helped me, particularly in an academic career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So UConn is a member of, it's called the National Center for Faculty Diversity and Development.
Okay.
They have a lot of resources that helps, especially pre-tenure faculty, navigate academia, navigate tenure, how to mentor graduate students,
right?
How not to mentor graduate
might be more important.
How to work with students. So that has been a wonderful resource. They have a lot of training programs, and actually that's something I also have my graduate students participate as they think about what they want to do in terms of next steps in their career, if they're interested in academia, how to build their portfolio. Besides that, that is also CIMER, CIMER.
Okay.
That is for mentor enrichment and research. So that is actually also a good resource for how to be a mentor.
Excellent.
Right. So I've used quite a bit of their resources into building my ability to mentor, which I think is really, really important. The other thing is I am part of Poultry Science. I'm also part of the International Association for Food Protection. They have a program that's called as Mentor Match, where anybody in any level of their career, if they feel like they need a mentor, they can be matched with someone.
Okay.
So that has actually helped me both in mentoring for me and also supporting upcoming professionals in the field, which always feels good to talk to them, fresh minds. But yeah, so that has been really rewarding.
Excellent. Some really good suggestions there. Last question then is, as you've gone throughout your career and you've interacted with a lot of different folks, from the producer side to other faculty to, folks in the different agencies you work with, are there things that one or two things maybe that you've seen in the folks that you've looked at as being the most successful by whichever metric you wanted to define success, which we all obviously do differently, but that you've seen that characteristics that they possess that you think that's why they're successful, and that's what I want to emulate. And that's also when I'm working with my graduate students, I'm pointing out to them, hey, this is something you really need to try to develop in yourself, because it seems to have a real relationship to becoming a successful professional.
So the first thing that comes to my mind is I was just reading an article yesterday. There's a society called this Association of Women in Science,
Mhm.
right? They send, like a Monday morning something articles. So one of the things is saying no.
Yeah, absolutely.
Saying no can be empowering, and I have to say I'm really bad at that. So I'm
Mhm.
learning. So that's something I've seen in my mentors, right? And those that I want to emulate, who are successful, able to get to things that are a priority for them, for what they want to do in terms of their career, is saying no, which I do try. But yes, which I'm also trying to impart to my students, how to prioritize, when to say yes, when to say no. And the other thing I think it's really obvious, time management.
Yeah.
They kind of tie in together, saying no and being able to manage your time and prioritize what you want to do, right? So they kind of tie in together. So these are two things that I'm working on, have been working on forever, but some things I've seen in people who are successful.
Yep. Those are fantastic suggestions, and hard to work on really for anybody. Probably in any career. Academia doesn't like either one of those two things very, very much. But it's funny you say that, especially thinking about saying no. Just recently was having a conversation with a colleague of mine at another institution about a project that we might be taking on. And we have a third colleague who's here at NC State with me, who is earlier in their career. And the colleague at the other institution said, I think this would be a really good thing for them to do,
Mm.
because I'm to take the lead on. I'm happy to be a part of it, but them to take the lead on, because I'm not doing it. I'm learning to say no, and they're in roughly the same area of their career as I am. And we were joking about it afterwards. Of it is nice to be able to get to that point where you've learned to say no, because as you said, it ties back into that time management of, I have these things I want to do. If I'm going to do them well, I'm going to have to say no to other things. But me saying no to it can also be a really good opportunity for somebody else. And it could be for your graduate student. Look, no, I don't have the time for it, but I have a student who could maybe take that on, and it could be a really good building block for their career. Or
Yeah.
no, I don't have time for it, but I know I've got a colleague over here that could really benefit from taking the lead on this project. And so saying no doesn't have to necessarily shut the door. It could
No.
open the door for somebody else and then give you the time. And you shouldn't be
Yeah.
afraid to do that when it's appropriate. I think that's a great answer to that question.
Yeah. And I think more than being afraid, I think it's to do with academic guilt, which is
Sure.
everywhere, right? Yes. But yeah, saying no can be empowering.
Yep. And obviously we've got folks that are listening academic and as well as industry, and same thing is true in that area too, right? Where it's, I'm in here and I've been tasked with this job, and if I say no, will my boss think that I just don't want to, or that and it's no, they'll, if you do it right, they'll respect, I want to do my job well. And I'm not going to have time to do what I'm doing well or that well. So I'm going to have to say no to that one. And generally people will say, oh, okay. Your reasoning is sound. I get it.
Yes. Instead of just saying flat out no,
Right.
you need to just find out the best way to say no.
I love that. We will end on that note. My guest today has been Dr. Anne Amalaradjou. She is an associate professor at UConn working in the poultry production area. Marianne, thank you very much for your time today. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you so much. Nice meeting you too.
Once again, this has been the Feed Science Podcast. I'm Adam Farnolds from North Carolina State University's Prestige Department of Poultry Science and the Animal Food Manufacturing Program here. On behalf of Wisenetics, thanks for listening, and we will talk to you next time.